Okay, hello photo class. For this video I want to talk to you about how to apply selective blur to an image so that you can replicate depth of field effects. Let's say you're using your phone as a camera and it doesn't really give you the shallow depth of field effects you want, or you're using your regular DSLR camera and because of the way you took the photograph it just came out sharp and you would like to selectively blur some areas just for effect. So one really good artist to look up is an artist named Keith Carter. He's kind of legendary for these beautiful shallow depth of field effects. So this is real. This is a real sculpture in Venice, Italy, and a real man walking by. It looks very surreal and not real at all, but it's because he used what's called the tilt shift effect in his photography, which is the back focal plane where the light focuses on the film, where the digital sensor is out of sync with the focal plane of the lens, and so it creates an effect where only a part of the image is in focus. And so there's one of his photos. Here's another. This is really beautiful. Portraiture is really where you want to have shallow depth of field effects, because often having the face really sharp as a tack and then everything else around it blurred out can give a really nice effect that makes you really look at the person. So you see it a lot in photography. And this is another Keith Carter photo, by the way. This is the last Keith Carter photo I'll show you. This is also shot in Venice, Italy. And you can see that tilt shift effect because there's only one bar right across the middle that's in focus, and everything above that and below is out, and that comes from using a tilt shift lens. All right, so, and also in class I always show this DVD on Keith Carter, and it's the photographer series. I couldn't find it on YouTube or on Vimeo or any of the other places where you'd normally find videos, so, but you can look his work up on your own if you like. All right, so we'll go back to this photo that I just showed you guys how to edit in black and white in the previous video and just show you how to apply some blur effects. And there's always a lot of different ways to do this. Some easy ways, some a little bit harder ways. So I'll show you a way that kind of mimics what we just did with this photo, where we had created a light version of the photo and a dark version of the photo and then erase through that to lighten up areas. So I'm going to do the same thing here except with blur. So I'm going to go to layer and then duplicate the layer so that I've got just another version of this again. And all right, so now what I want to do is take the underneath layer and turn that into a blurry out of focus image. So I'm going to go up to filter, and there's blur and blur gallery. I'll show you the blur gallery after this. Blur gallery has a lot of really cool effects, but if I go back up to blur, and I could use lens blur, for example, or Gaussian blur. I'll just click on lens blur, and that actually opens up a separate window, and I'm just going to click OK on that. There's a lot of parameters that you could change in here. You can fool around with those on your own if you like, but that gives me a nice blurry out of focus image. I'm going to OK. All right, and so now that's my underneath layer. I'm going to turn this layer back on by clicking that little eye icon, and then I'm going to click back on top of back onto this layer. So you always have to be selected on the layer to be able to do stuff to it. And so now what I can do is I can selectively erase things out to reveal blurry areas if I like. So, all right, so in order to do that, we can use that layer mask thing again. So I'm going to click the layer mask button down here. All right, and make sure I've got black selected. I'm going to select a really huge brush this time, so I can do a lot pretty quickly. And yeah, I'm going to go for around 500 pixels for the brush size. And I'm going to turn the opacity up pretty high and the flow up pretty high, just because I want to make this a quick demo. All right, so now as I'm painting with black on that masking layer, it's basically just wiping out everything. I can make everything blurry except for the angel, but that would be ridiculous. That looks terrible. And so I've gone too far, and as you remember, if you all click on that layer mask, you can see you're just painting with a color. So I've got, because I've turned the opacity and flow down, that black has become a gray. And so if you remember what we learned from the last video, I'm going to flip this back, toggle that over so it's now white. And when I paint with white, it's going to undo what I did. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because I went way too far with that. So I'd like to have this water come out sharp. And so I can basically go back in and erase through what I want to reveal as sharp. And so you can kind of imitate that Keith Carter effect just by taking a band of this photograph and erasing it out. And then that'll give you kind of a similar effect. So that's one way of doing it. I'm not going to do much more to this. You could go in and selectively just randomly pull things out. You don't have to try to mimic an actual lens effect. You could just get kind of creative and weird with it. But that's up to you. Anyway, that's not a very good job on that, but that's just one technique that you could use. So create a blurred out layer, and then use the sharp layer on top and erase through that. You could just erase through the layer if you don't want to bother or don't quite understand the layer mask mode. I'm going to go back and undo all that work and show you another technique. This is actually a faster, easier technique. So you go back to Flur, filter. I put the words filter and blur together. Go to filter and then go to blur gallery. And that actually gives you some really cool things that you can play around with. The only one I'm going to show you right now is just, well, I'll show you two. I'll show you fill blur and then tilt shift. And then you can play with the other ones on your own. So fill blur. With this, basically, you just select points. So you see the little push pin icon? So if you add a point, that adds a point that you can control, right? So if I take this, and then if I click and drag on that little circle icon, I can turn the blur way up just for that area. You can see just that area around the push pin has gone crazy. Or I can turn it all the way down to 0. And so now that area is in focus, and I basically preserved it so it won't get blurred out by other points. And so if I put another blur point here, I could actually turn the blur up on this area. And then I could take this point here and turn the blur down on it. And so it's actually kind of works in zones. You can see it's basically sharpened up this entire zone. I could put another point here and intentionally create some more blur there. I can put another point here, turn the blur down on that if I want to. So you basically just go through this thing creating points that are blurry or not blurry. So you can keep areas from getting blurred by putting a pin on it and sharpening it up and so forth. So that's a pretty easy way to work. This one seems like it's gone too far. You want to try to make it look a little bit naturalistic. And again, you might look at more works by Keith Carter or just Google tilt shift photography and you can see some really neat stuff done with that. If you want to do it in camera, you can buy, I think it's called Lens Baby is the company. They make a tilt shift lens that you put on a digital SLR and the lens itself will actually tilt and move around and give you these kind of selective blur effects. So that's one way of doing it. When you're done, click the OK button. And then you'll have an image that is partially in focus. I'm going to undo that again, and I'll show you one more blur option in the blur gallery. And this is actually called tilt shift. I'm going to pick a different image to use for that though. So you may have seen like the sort of toy effect in Photoshop before. And so I'll show you how to do that real quick. So first off, this is this image I shot in Chicago a few years ago. I'm going to go to Image Adjustments. I'm just going to hit Auto Tone. And that'll sharpen it up a little bit. It was a little bit kind of a bleary sort of image. All right, so right now everything is pretty much in pretty good focus. And so if I go to Filter and Blur Gallery and do Tilt Shift, it basically represents that tilt shift effect. And so I can move this point here over what I want to have in focus. You can then drag these in or out to create more or less areas of focus. I'm going to put it back where it was. You can even grab this and make it go at an angle like so and sort of increase that. So basically you can just shift these parameters around and hit OK. And so now if I zoom in a little bit, you can tell that it gives you that kind of toy effect. So there's something about having one point in focus and a lot of other things out of focus in a city, a large city photo with lots of cars in it, that just makes the other cars look like little toys. It almost looks like a little model set or something. So kind of a neat effect. But anyway, that's all I got for you for now. I'll be doing a few more videos to send your way soon. Thanks.